Let's see here. All right. Shalom, shalom. We are here for the first day of unleavened bread. We have got together a little something, a couple little morsels that we could sit up here and chew on a little bit for today. I don't want to go too long. Um, but we want to be able to think about and have something to kind of meditate on during these days in this time. So I wanted to go over a couple things to kind of put. I don't want to say put because we can assume that the will of the Father is in your hearts and your mind already. I want to kind of stir up that desire and perhaps even challenge it, because that's what these days and times are here for. So one of the things that I say all the time, but the reason why I say it all the time because I know that it is an important concept to grasp. So, that's why I say it all the time. But when we properly understand the feast days and their spiritual significances, we gain a perfect understanding of who Yeshua is and what exactly it is that he came to do. So knowing that, that's the reason why, I'm always talking about the fact that, these feast days, these feast times explain for us, they show for us the plan of salvation. It shows us what it is that Yeshua came to do and how it really relates to our lives. So we want to kind of get into some of that. I want to, before we get into it, I want to not just say it. Maybe somebody didn't never hear me say it before. So let me put a couple verses behind it just to kind of verify, what we saying over here. If we look over in Psalms chapter 40, verse 7. I don't know if I can get one of you guys to read this verse over here. Yeah, go ahead, read that real quick.
Then I said, Lo, I come in the volume of the book, it is written to me.
It is written of me. Okay, so we think about the book that's being referred to over here, the scriptures, right? The law of Yah, the holy writ. This thing is written about Yeshua. This thing is written about Yeshua, right? And Yeshua knew this. Yeshua knew this, and he taught this to his disciples. When you think about, if you just think about the fact that if I know that I'm not gonna physically talk to you no more, right? I'm gonna give you my last and final things, right? No. I'm going to give you my last words, right? I'm going to give you some important things. I'm going to say some things that are important for you to be able to know and understand, right? And so if we look over in Luke, 24 and 44, just setting the tone over here. Yeshua done died already. He rose from the dead. And in between that time, he dealt with his disciples for a while before he went back to the Father. And so one of the things that he said to his disciples at that time, uh before, in between the time when he in the physical form wasn't never going to see his disciples no more, he said over here, verse 44, what did I say right there?
And he said unto them, These are the words which I spake unto you, while I was yet with you, that all things must be fulfilled, which were written in the law of Moses, and in the prophets, and in the Psalms concerning me.
Okay, so Yeshua, when he was on this earth for one of the last times, decided that it was kind of important for him to look back in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms and show his disciples all of the things that was concerning him. When we look at the scriptures now, through the power of the Ruach HaKodesh, and the wisdom that he gives to his people, it becomes quite amazing when we look through the scriptures and uh, the revelation and enlightenment that we receive from the Ruach, when we're able to see Yeshua all over the place in the scriptures, right? All over the place is where he is, right? And so again, this whole book that we look at is about Yeshua and everything that he did for us, his people, Israel. But more specifically, now, the feast days. The feast days are about him too, right? We're able to see a literal surface understanding of what the feast days represent in terms of, when we look at Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, on top of everything, it's what actually happened kind of in historical record, right? It's literally about the Exodus from Egypt, the death angel passing over the houses of those with the blood on their lintels and on their doorposts, right? But we have to be able, based on what Yeshua said, to see the spiritual significance of these things, right? The whole scriptures, right? I've many times I hear people talk about, the Bible is literal. It's a literal book, and we just supposed to look at it from a literal perspective. Um, it is literal, right? And you are supposed to look at it from a literal perspective. But that can't be the only way that you look at it, right? If you're not dealing with this book here, grab my Bible from out there for real quick. If you can't look at the Bible from a spiritual perspective, then you're not looking at the Bible correctly, right? But here, let me see that real quick. One thing I can't do is know exactly where these verses are, except for I look at them and see them in my Bible. I can't even look them up digitally. I gotta look them up in my Bible in order to find them. So let me pull this up real quick. Okay, all right, finally. Whew. I don't know what's going on with this thing. Okay, so back on track. Over here, Romans 7 and 14 is saying that the law is spiritual. The law is spiritual. The law, the Torah, is spiritual, right? So it's giving you these physical things to do, these literal things to do. But we have to be able to understand the spiritual significance of these things so that we can really understand what they want for us to know. If Romans chapter 7 and 14 is true by saying that these things are spiritual, right? And so when we look at the scriptures and the Torah, we have to again look at these things for their spiritual significances. In Colossians, let me just pull this up real quick. Colossians, Colossians chapter 2 and verse 16. 16. What's that say?
Let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of an holy day, or in the new moon or in the Sabbath days,
17.
which are a shadow of things to come, but but the body is of Yeshua. I'm
Okay,
gonna
so
try.
when we look at this verse over here, we look at this verse a little bit. Look at this verse, it's talking about these holy days and new moons and Sabbaths. It's telling you, hold on, let me get my jump popped up on my screen. Sorry. I don't know how this thing, I'm just having some main problems right now. Here we go. Okay, so it's telling you over here that the holy days, the new moons, the Sabbaths are a shadow of things to come. Actually, when you look in the New American Standard Version over here, it says that the substance, the substance is of Messiah. The substance of these things, the holy days, the new moons, the Sabbath, is of Messiah. So when we think about these things over here, they're giving us pictures of Messiah and what he's done for us. And so when we think about uh Pesach and Feast of Unleavened Bread, we have the same situation going on over here, right? Pesach most definitely exemplifies for us um our crossover point, right? The point of transition over here. Israel was at before the Passover. Israel was already a chosen, promised, predestined people before the Passover even happened, right? But the facts of the matter are that they were owned and operated by Pharaoh, right? Period. Period. Point blank. Pharaoh was the master of of Israel in Egypt. Period. Before the Passover, right? And so that Passover, when the Passover happened, that was the point of redemption. That was the point of reconciliation. That was the point where the connection between the Most High and his chosen and his already chosen and his already promised and his already predestined people was established. It was established when when he took Israel out of Egypt, right? And so, from a physical perspective, right, from a historical perspective, but what we want to think about is now the spiritual implications over here, right? How do we relate this now to ourselves, right? How do we think about this in the same way in regards to us over here, right? How do we stick our spiritual Pesach and our spiritual unleavened bread into all of this, right? So let's go over to Exodus and let's think about some things that are shown to us in Exodus from the physical standpoint, and let's try to look at them not only from the physical standpoint, but from the spiritual perspective. So let's go over to Shemot, Exodus chapter 12, and let's read 18 through 20. We're going to talk about 18 to 20. That's what we're going to talk about. Things that we find inside of these three verses over here. Let me pull the verses up. Mm, okay, can you read Exodus 12, 18 through 20?
Yep, in the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. 7 days shall there be no leaven found in your houses, for whosoever eateth that which is leavened, even that soul shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he be a stranger or born in the land. Ye shall not eat nothing leavened, in all your habitations shall ye eat unleavened bread.
Okay, very good. So over here now, let's go back. Let's think about over here now with, first of all, dealing with her. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change the view of this real quick. We want to look at a couple things. This, and okay. So in verse 16, I want to look at. Oh wait, 15. I want to look at this right here, 7. I want to look at this word for 7, which is Sheba. Sheva is the word for 7, right? It literally means 7, the number 7, but it's from this word is root, is this word here, 7650. Let's click on that right there. Its root is this word that properly means to be complete, but used only as the denominative form, which is like the numerical form, to 7 oneself. That is, swear as if by repeating a declaration 7 times. Right? So this word over here, that is the root of the word 7, actually deals with the fact of repeating a thing 7 times. And in that, in the repetition of that thing, it causes it to be complete. Right? So when we think about what's going on over here with us doing this thing for 7 days, is giving us the idea of kind of completing a thing, right? When we think about the idea of a week, being the 7 days, we do this thing for a week. We do this thing for the 7-day period, which is a week, which is this completed situation. It's a cycle. We've repeated this same thing over and over again, exactly the same 7 times. And once we've done it 7 times, we've completed this cycle. And so we do this feast, which, by the way, just happens to be the first annual feast that we keep, right? Um, and it gives us these instructions that are connected with it. And so when we think about this, just without even getting into the specifics of what we do in the feast, we can know that the things that we learn in and during this feast are things that we repeat. It's things that we do continually. It's things that we do cyclically. We do over and over again. Because we're given this time frame that is placed inside of this cycle, right? And so when we think about unleavened bread in terms of being this feast day, again, I'm saying that the scriptures is telling us that we're supposed to look at these feast days to understand what Yeshua has done for us. We're supposed to look at these feast days to understand what our life in Messiah is to be. And before we get to that, before we get to what the thing is, the first thing we could know and understand is that whatever it is, there's repeating that goes on. There's the idea of doing things over and over again, not like this one-time thing that happens, right? Not just like we go to the church and we say this thing, right? And then after we said this thing, now and forever, there's nothing that you can do to reverse the thing that you said over there, at the altar call, right? This ain't that, right? This is the complete opposite of that. You sit up there and you say the thing that you said, and then you repeat that thing in a cyclical way over and over again, like Groundhog Day, right? The movie, right? Okay, so that's just just the beginning, right? What that we see over here in this verse is telling us, is letting us know that the thing that is getting ready to, the instructions that it's about to give us, is about to be this thing that exemplifies a cycle. It's about to tell us about this thing that we cyclically do, and we should implement this thing into our lives in such a way, repeat it in such a way that uh, uh, it becomes our life. When you think about the word seven again, the number seven comes from the word that is translated as oath. As far as the Most High is concerned, if you make an oath, there's no backing out of it. If you said a thing, then you do the thing that you said, right? You do that. If I said an oath, I'd probably be like, well, I'm going to take out the garbage every week on garbage day. And then to oathanize it, I don't know if oathanize is a word. I just made it. I had the power of defying. I just done that, right? If I oathanize it, I would say it 7 times, right? I would say, I'm going to take out the garbage every week on garbage day. I would say that 7 times. And and if I said it like that, right, I oathanized it, right? And so not only am I saying it though, I'm doing what I said I'm going to do, right? And so the same thing is true with the idea that we get with this command that's given to us that we do during this 7-day period, right? Not that we do this thing exactly for the rest of our lives, but I'm saying the picture that it shows us, the shadow that it creates, right? The type that it shows us is something that we repeat in life, um perpetually, right? Continually. So going back to the verse, what is the thing then? The thing is, hold on, let me pull up the verse. The thing is, keep losing my cursor. The thing is, 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Unleavened bread is the thing. No leaven. Unleavened bread is the thing, right? That's the thing that we do in the feast of unleavened bread, right? And so when we think about you know, what that represents, of course, we are able to connect unleavened, leaven or yeast with sin, right? With the thing that causes us, when we, from a physical perspective, the thing that causes the bread to rise up, to puff up, to blow up, right? It's amazing when I sit up here and look at Teresa sit up here and make this bread. She puts this stuff in this bowl, and it's like way down at the bottom of the bowl. She covers that thing up, and then the next thing you know, it's busting out of the bowl. It done blew all the way up, blowing up out of the bowl because of the yeast that's in it, to blow up, to swell up, right? But again, if we only just think about the Feast of Unleavened Bread and think about bread and yeast, we're not dealing with this thing properly, because Paul told us that the law is spiritual, right? He said it. He said it's holy and it's good. And he said it's spiritual. It's talking to us about spiritual things. We understand the spiritual things because we're carnal and we have to be told about things kind of in a carnal way, right? So it's explained to us carnally to affect us spiritually, right? We're able to understand it in our spiritual minds. And so we have to, at some point, get to the place where our main emphasis is not on the yeast, but our main emphasis is on what that represents, what it is that yeast represents, which is sin, right? So I want to look at what I want to look at when we think about this whole idea of sin and yeast. What I want to talk about a little bit is, let me pull it up on the screen over here. Let me make this. I want to look at this word right here. This word right here, which says gay, it means arrogance, pride, right? See over here, it gives us, it's the feminine. This is the feminine form of the root. Here's the root right here. Let's look at the root. The root is ga'a, which is, now the derivative is that word that's translated as root. But look at what translated as pride. But look at what the root does: to mount up, in general, to rise, right? To be majestic, gloriously, grow up, increase, be risen, triumph. Right. This is if I sit up here and erase this over here and just write yeast in there. That's what yeast does, don't it? It causes that bread to mount up. I seen
Mhm.
it. I seen it with my very own eyes. That yeast causes that wheat to mount up and overflow up, to rise up in that bowl.
Yep.
Right? That's what it causes it to do. Right? And so when we think about this now from a spiritual perspective, we need to talk about how are we gonna spiritualize this, because the Bible don't want for us to sit around here and be like thinking about this bread, this literal bread and this yeast, and just stop right there. Right? We got to figure out what the spiritual implications are over here. So this thing that's going on, this pride, this is what we need to be thinking about over here. When we think about Feast of Unleavened Bread and its spiritual significances, right?
Hmm.
I want to pull up. I want to look at this real quick. Let me for now pull up Proverbs. I want to look at chapter Proverbs chapter 8:13. Proverbs 8:13.
The fear of Yahweh is to hate evil. I have hated pride and arrogance, and the evil way, and the perverse mouth.
Okay, so when we think about this thing, this again, we're talking about Feast of Unleavened Bread. We're talking about yeast from a spiritual perspective, which we're being able to identify as pride. And so when we look at that scripture over here, when it's talking about, we saw that it says, I have hated pride and arrogance and the evil way, right? So in the context of this thing and us removing this yeast from our situation, being this unleavened thing that we're getting rid of, right? Before we're able to remove it, before we're able to remove the thing, we have to be able to see it. We have to be able to identify it in order to get rid of it.
That's true.
Right? If you can't see the yeast, how are you supposed to get rid of it? You have to be able to see and identify the pride. You have to be able to see and identify the arrogance. You have to be able to see and identify this perverse mouth that it talks about over there in Proverbs 8 and 13. And then, moreover, you got to be able to see and identify the perverse mind, because there can't be a perverse mouth without there being a perverse mind. Yeshua said that, right? Yeshua said that in Matthew 12 and 34. Pull that up. Let me pull this up over here. Matthew chapter 12 and 34. What's that say?
It says, Brood of adders, how are you able to speak what is good, being wicked? For the mouth speaks from the overflow of the heart.
The mouth speaks from the overflow of the heart. Out of the abundance of one's heart is what did I say? I like the King James is what I got memorized in my mind. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Right? Out of the abundance of the heart does the mouth speak. So when we think about the idea of seeing and identifying a perverse mouth, not only do we have to think about what the mouth is saying, but we can't forget the heart, because you only saying what's in your heart to say. People sit up here and they have these things to say about things, and then they'll just put at the end, "Oh, I'm just playing," or "I didn't mean it." Or you hear like these people come out with some of these, when you deal with people of other, different backgrounds, when they sit up there and have all of these little things that you could take as racist or something to say, and then maybe they'll pull back, after they say it, or whatever, right? Yeshua over there said, "You say what's in your heart to say. If it came out your mouth, it's only because that's in your heart to say it." Right? So again, when we think about this idea of being able to identify the yeast first, You got to see to get rid of the yeast, in order to get rid of it, you got to see it and identify it first. Right? That's the first thing. Before we could get it out, we got to be able to see that it's even there. And so pride in us, we got to be able to understand what pride looks like. If we want to get it out, right? If we want to get the pride out, how are we supposed to get it out if we don't even know what pride is? You could be sitting up here and just be the most pridefulest person that ever walked on the earth. But to you, it's something else. To you, maybe you used your power of divine and you changed what that even is, right? And so we have to be able to be in a place where we're able to look at pride first, identifying it and understand that is a thing that the Most High hates. He hates it, right? He hates pride and he hates arrogance, right? So looking at Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread as our initial period of transition and change toward righteousness, right? Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, is our initial period of transition and change towards righteousness. We see this, as we've already talked about. In fact, when we look at Israel, that was the point of crossover right there, right? So, people, when they sit up here and want to be on this whole skin color, I'm Israel because I'm black. Israel was Israel before the Passover. They was chosen. They was the people. They was promised. They had a destiny that was prescribed to them. But it was paramount to the situation for them to go through that Passover situation. And if they didn't, they wasn't going to be able to stake claim to the destiny that was predestined for them.
They was going into the wilderness to be humbled,
to see if they was able to even keep the commandments. That's what it says over there in Deuteronomy chapter 8. It tells you that. And so we understand that Israel, yes, is a chosen people, but they wasn't connected to the Most High till they went through the steps. And the initial step over there of that is that Passover Feast of Unleavened Bread situation. Now, when we think about that, right, there was this simple act of obedience that was required of the people, that was what the people were instructed to do in order to be able to be added to the relationship with Messiah. Right, the first thing he had to do was apply the blood to the doorpost. Well, I guess applying the blood was connected to the, I guess I'm saying it was the first thing. They really had to choose the lamb, right? They had to choose the lamb. There was a collection of things that needed to be done. But in all actuality, they could have got the lamb, killed it, slayed it, and ate it and all of that. But until they put the blood on the doorpost, that was what they needed to do. So let's just leave it at the blood on the doorpost, because that was the most significant part of the thing. So that the blood on the doorpost was the simple obedience that was necessary from the people to be able to begin to be connected to the Father. And then so you have that, and then you have this other thing over here, this idea of the yeast and getting the yeast out, right? To be counted as part of Israel, there was two main things that had to be done over here, right? You had to get the blood and put it on your doorposts, and then there was this other part that came with it, that you were supposed to get the yeast out. and not deal with this yeast for this short period. And so again, when we think about this idea of spiritualizing these things, in our beginning kind of transformative transitional periods, there's just these little simple acts of obedience that's connected to our situation that we need to be taken care of in order to be even counted in the way. And it's not even really kind of a deep spiritual thing. It's simple things, right? Broad things, general things, right? Real life, right? Turning away from sin, right? Turn away from sin. Repent. First thing you got to do is repent. You got to turn away from sin and sinful ways. Now, again, when we look at the feast days in the big scope of things, the power, the power to refrain from sin comes after. Even a comprehensive understanding of what sin is even comes after. They didn't receive the law, yet they don't know it. Right? They just finding out about the Most High and who He is. They know that the Most High, the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is this mighty Elohim, and He's capable of taking out all gods and killing Pharaoh and taking their people. That's like the extent of what they know of the Most High, is that He's very powerful and He's able. And whatever it is that He says, let's do that. I don't know what He's going to say, but whatever He says, let's do that. So far, it's just kill the lamb, put the blood on the doorpost, and get the yeast out. And that's what I want to do. Right? But kind of just simplifying this is dealing with these initial simple acts of obedience that need to be done. And not dealing with even how I'm supposed to do it. I'm just making a decision. I'm just making a decision to do the things that He wants for me to do. Not dealing with the how part. We'll sit around and overthink things and say, well, I said that I want to be a follower of Yeshua, but I got all of these things that how am I supposed to, I got these strong desires to do these things. How am I supposed to? We have to be able to make a decision just even in our minds to say, I'm going to do it. Right? When I think about loving my wife, right? In the beginning, I don't know how I'm supposed to deal with her. But I made a decision that I wanted to do it before I knew how I was supposed to deal with her, though. Because it was a decision that I made. I didn't think about the strength that it took to be able to do it. I didn't think about the changes that she was going to put me through beforehand. I just said, I'm going to do it. Right? I said, I'm going to do it. I made that decision. And moving into the covenant phase of it, I'm oathed. What was the word I made up? I oathanized. I oathanized it. Right? I said I'm going to love her. I didn't think about how I was going to do it. I just knew that I had to do it because I said I was going to do it. So when we think about this Passover unleavened bread thing, in terms of our connection to the Most High, we know that He has ways about Himself, and we know that He wants for us to do those things. But this ain't about the how or the power to do it. It's about making the decision to do it. That's what this thing is over here. right? When we think about this, we can identify, we can see, oh, this is pride. I don't know how I can rid myself of pride, but I'm at least able to know that this thing over here is pride, and I need to not be doing this because he hates this, right? And so let me just remove it. Let me just remove it because he said remove it. Let me just turn away from this thing because he said turn away from it. And again, at this point, we're not even dealing with the how, because the empowerment comes later. The empowerment comes later after I make the decision to even do it in the first place. But if I don't never make the decision, the empowerment's never going to come. The first thing I got to do is even just decide to do what it is that he wants for me to do and turning away from it. Okay, let's look at something else, right? Because we're talking about this sin, this leaven that we got to get out. We identify the thing as pride, right? And so let me pull up the Bible again over here. So let's look over here. Let's pull up James 1 and 14 and 15. Can we read those two verses there?
But each one is enticed when he is drawn away by his own desires and trapped. Then, when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it has been accomplished, brings forth death.
Okay, so that being said, also I want to, in light of that, I want to look at this word over here. Three. So over here, first of all, James is saying over here, each one is enticed by his own desires. His own desires is the thing that draws him away, and he becomes trapped. Right? So these desires are something over here. These desires are this thing. But we can make a connection because of these desires, these things that trap us, these things that cause us to sin. This can easily be connected with pride and arrogance. Because if I feel a way about something, like say for instance, let's think about here. Let's just, before we look at the word, let's just think about some things real quick. So if we think about anything that the Most High said, let's just look at the Ten Commandments, for instance. If we think about the idea of coveting another person's thing, I don't know what it is in me but pride that causes me to covet somebody else's stuff to the point where I act on it and take it. If I sit up here and go through the list, coveting or stealing or killing or lying, I don't know what there's probably other things that could be added to the list. But I'm saying that we could put pride in there on the list of the thing that's causing you to do each one of those things. If I think about how I deal with my parents, I can't think of a thing. There's probably other things, but I can't think of a thing that's more prevalent in the action that takes place whenever you rise up against your parents, more so than pride. Something inside of you swelled up to the place where you felt like you was bigger than them. You felt like you was able to think about things in your own way, and you didn't have to mind what it was that they had said. I'm sure there's other things, but pride is up there on the list. And so when we think about this idea of desires that's trapping you, if we think about that verse over in uh in James, pride is right there with that. Right? It's right there with it. Okay, going back over here to what the word we wanted to look at was nephesh. Because there's some parts of nephesh that we want to deal with. Nephesh, which is soul, with it, which is your soul, which is your being, which is what you are. You are a nephesh, right? You are a being. That's what you are. You're a breathing creature, right? That's what you are. But I want to think about these. I always, when I think about nephesh, I never want to not think about this aspect of it, animal, right? Because we're just really just intelligent animals walking around, right? So and when we think about animals, we think about them doing things on instinct. They operate instinctually. Certain times of years they mate. It's just certain times that they do what they do at certain times of the year. Just instinctually do it, right? They just do things on instinct, and they move. All of that. They go from one part of the country to another, right? Just instinctually. It's not like they're sitting around thinking about a plan or whatever. They just go and they do it. The turtles, they come up out of the water, they go far away from the water, they lay the eggs, and then they go back. And then when those legs they hatch, those little baby turtles instinctually run to the water. And some of them make it, some of them don't. But it's all just instinctual, right? So when I think about a being, a nephesh, I never want to not think about this. And people don't like this sometimes, but it's just pride. It's just pride making you think that you're not an animal, right? It's just your pride rising up.
Yep.
At the end of that's all.
Except that
But
you're an animal.
yeah, you're an animal, and we can see people that just behave just like animals
That,
all the time.
that's what's worse. Yeah.
Right? You see it. You can see people just manifest who they really are. But I didn't want to stay right there. I wanted to look at some other things that's connected with your being, things that make up who you are. Over here, look, that says appetite. Right? Your appetite is something that's connected with what it makes up who you are. The things that you desire. Right? That's another part over here. If we go down a little bit further, here it is. Pleasure. Right? All of these things over here are connected with your instincts, your with your soul, with your nephesh, right? And so again, when we think about over here, when we're drawn by our desires and we're drawn by our appetites and when we're drawn by our pleasures, we become trapped, right? And those things conceive and give birth to sin.
Hmm.
And so when we're spiritualizing the Feast of Unleavened Bread, we have to be able to get to the place where when we're inspecting and investigating our pleasures and our desires. Because again, we have to identify the things first, right? To be able to get them out, we got to see them. So we have to be able to, one of the things that we have to do is actually look at our appetites and look at our desires and look at our pleasures to know if those things are causing us to swell up with pride and do things that's contrary to the Most High. Because of the fact that when we look back in Exodus, none of those things were supposed to be found in our house. The leaven. The leaven is said, don't let the, hold on. I don't even want to just say what it, I want to go back to it. Let me get, let's see here. If we go back to Exodus, Exodus chapter 12, what verse was we looking at here? 16? No. 18. It says 19, no leaven is to be found in your houses. No leaven is to be found in your houses, right? And so when we think about this idea of understanding that leaven, this yeast in us is pride. Pride is this thing that kind of facilitates and kind of initiates all these sin things that come after. It's the beginning stages of sin rising up, and it leads to anything. Pride is the seed to sit up here and just manifest all types of sins, right? But again, we're spiritualizing the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and none of this thing is supposed to be found in your houses, right? So we had to deal with the idea of removing the pride from our situation, but not only removing it, but maintaining the removal of it. Don't bring the stuff in here, right? So when you dealt with the removal of yeast, you started off with the obvious thing, the bread, right? We got bread over there. Let me get the bread out. You take the bread out. If you make bread, you got the yeast out. Just the obvious surface things, right? Then once you got rid of the obvious, then now you start looking at labels. What this got yeast in it? I didn't even know about that. Then you get that out, right? Under normal circumstances, you might go to the store a couple times in a week, right? And you just pick stuff up that you always get, not thinking about it. But at this time, when we're supposed to be removing the yeast and maintaining the removal of it, now we're looking more closely. We're looking at the labels. We're looking like, oh, wait a second. This thing that I always get, I can't get this thing right now. I gotta leave this over here at the store, right? So if we never get to the place of inspecting our own self, our own nefesh, like that, then you're not really keeping this feast. You're not really keeping it. You just playing. As an elder, your wife, you always be talking about people just playing. You just playing out here, right? You playing games if you not thinking about this from a spiritual perspective. If all you doing is thinking about the bread and the stuff that you eat over here, you really just thinking about, what you could put in the toilet. That's the only thing you thinking about. But what about what's in the abundance of your heart? You trying to get that out. Are you looking at the label on your heart? That's what we supposed to be sitting over thinking about, because again, in our verse, it says no leaven. So if we spiritualizing it, no pride is to be found in your houses. It's not to be found. right? And so we, again, like I said, we're supposed to be looking at our desires. We're supposed to be looking at our appetites. We're supposed to be looking at our pleasures. We're supposed to be looking at ourself, at our nefesh, because that's what this feast is about. The spiritual significances of it, and not only finding it, but seeing it and getting rid of it. You're just making a decision to do it. Again, we're not even at the part of talking about having the spiritual strength to do it. We're just saying if we made the decision, if we said that he's going to be our Elohim just based on the fact that he's just mighty and wondrous and can do all of these things, and he got all of these abilities that he's able to do either for or against us, we, at the same time that we made a decision, we also said we're going to inspect our desires and our pleasures and our appetites, and we're going to change those things, right? Because again, we're supposed to be hating pride, right? So much so that we running that stuff up out of here. All right, let me get a couple more scriptures over here. I don't want to go too much more, but I got a couple more things I want to deal with over here. Psalms. Let's look at Psalms 10. Psalms 10 and 3. 10, 3, and 4. Hold on, let me pull that up real quick. Sorry. Psalms 10, 3, and 4. What's that say? Okay, very good. Okay, so when we think about these verses over here, this is giving you the negative, right? The wrongdoer, the evil one boasts about his cravings. That's what the evil ones do, right? The cursed ones, the greedy one, the evil one and the greedy one, he does all these things against the Most High, right? And in his pride, he doesn't seek the Most High, right? And so, but the opposite is true then for the righteous, right? The opposite is true then for the righteous. If the one who's prideful doesn't seek the Most High, then the one who isn't should be doing that, right? We don't gotta just think about it. We can look over here. What do it say in chapter 70, verse 4? Okay, very good. So if we are talking about those that love deliverance of the Most High, if we love His deliverance, it says, hold on, what that saying? I like. It means the same thing, but I like the way that it reads in the King James. It says, "Let Elohim be magnified. Let Him be magnified." Right? If we think about it's easy to think about it in that way because if we think about something being magnified, you look at something in a magnifying glass and you've made that thing bigger, right? You've made that thing that's small, that's potentially out of sight, you've made it bigger. You've made it more prominent in your situation, right? And so when we think about the idea of making the Most High great, right? That's what we need to be doing. And that's also how we keep that pride out of our situation, right? If we're raising the Most High up, you can't really raise yourself up at the same time, right? If you rising the Most High up, you shrinking down your own self, right? If you making the Most High the one that's prominent, that's in the forefront, you know, by just very the virtue of, hold on, I'm having some issues over here. When you make the Most High, when you put him in the front, you're automatically bringing yourself back, right? And so again, when we think about this idea of uh, uh, getting the leaven out, getting the yeast out, getting the pride out, that involves magnifying the Most High, magnifying Elohim, right? So even if we don't know, again, this goes back to the idea of not dealing with the strength, power, and ability to do these things. Even if we're just keeping it at magnifying the Most High, we're able to do that. We're able to know that the Most High is who he said he was, because that's what caused us to be able to choose him in the first place. That fear, right? That fear, being able to know that he is mighty and he's able to remove you at any moment, right? And so when we think about this idea of removing this leaven and getting it out of our house and not having it be found in our house, seeing the pride, identifying the pride, and making the decision to remove it, I'm saying at this point in the game, in these initial stages, I'm saying looking at it in the context of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, when we seek to do it, when we seek to do the things, these initial acts of obedience, when we seek to do it, even if we say we don't know how we're going to do the things, at very least, bare minimum, we're able to magnify the Most High, look towards him, and make the Most High great in your situation. And just by virtue of you doing that, you lessen these other aspects, more specifically pride. And so again, when we think back to our verse over in Exodus, in terms of these things that we need to be doing, let me pull this back up again. In terms of, doing these things in a cycle, uh, uh, getting the leaven out, being the thing that you're doing in the cycle, getting it out, uh, keeping it out, understanding that we're looking at this thing from a spiritual perspective, that leaven is pride, so you know that you've made that decision to get the pride out. And so a way that you do that is by magnifying the Most High, by magnifying Yah, right? By putting your thoughts, letting your thoughts be on him. We looked at that verse over there in Psalms 10, 3 and 4, where it talks about the evildoer. It said, in all his thoughts, there is no Elohim. Right? All the evildoer did was not think about Elohim. But the righteous one, all he should be doing is thinking about Elohim. Right? The reverse. Right? So again, if I'm thinking about this again from a spiritual perspective, Feast of Unleavened Bread, again, we know that moving forward throughout the feast, we know that the power is at Shavuot. But we got to even just get to Shavuot. But I'm saying that we have to be able to first make a decision to want to follow him. And even in understanding that we don't have the power, strength, and ability to be able to do the things that he would have for us to do. In that understanding, being able to look to him to be able to gain strength from the Most High. Is even doing that is an act of you diminishing yourself and magnifying him. Right? So all of this begins with a decision and the choice that we make inside of ourselves to be able to trust in the Most High. And then again, when we look at Israel in the first Exodus, that's what happened. A choice was made. They saw those plagues happen. They saw those plagues happen, and then they made a choice in their mind that whenever Moses come around here and say to do this thing with the lamb and with the blood, I'm gonna go ahead and do it. The ones that did it, right? They did it based on a choice that they made, and they just did it. Again, not having all of the specifics and knowing all of the things that was necessary to follow him. And the same thing is true for you and I on this side, right? When we think about, coming to the Father, we come to the place where we understand that we need to turn from sin. We get to the place where we know that we have to turn away from sin, and we say, okay, I'm done, right, with living this way. I don't know how to live righteously. I don't know how to live righteously, but I know I want to do it. And I want to be able to look to the Most High in order to do it. That's as far as it got to go. That's as far as your knowledge of the situation has to go. And so, looking at this thing again, this is how we look at this thing from a spiritual perspective.
Can I say something real quick?
Go ahead.
I would just say that, like, so the person who says I gotta know everything before I try, before I do it, that person's probably never going to do it.
Or
I don't want to say they'll never do it, but
not thinking like that, they're not gonna do it.
If I say I gotta know all, like, if I'm trying to start out sewing or something, I gotta know everything about sewing before I sew my first piece. I'm probably never going to do it. But yeah.
And guess what that is, though?
That's pride. Right?
That's pride.
Because I gotta know.
You're doing it. You're the one that's doing it.
And I gotta have all this knowledge.
I gotta sit up here and do it and figure it out, and then I'll go ahead and do it. That's not faith. That's faith in your own knowledge. That's faith in your own ability to sit up here and do a thing, and not so. When we think about the original Exodus from Egypt, they were told to kill this lamb and put blood on the doorpost, and when they did that, their firstborn would be saved. That's when you think about it, like, that's what does me doing this thing over here got to do with this other thing?
That's the first thing our people would be like too.
I know. Why? Asking why. Trying to figure it out. And so we have to be able to move ourselves out of the way and magnify the Most High. And doing that simple thing is how we get that leaven out and maintain the keeping of it out. Not even dealing with uh the spiritual strength that we receive through the Ruach HaKodesh. We had to be able to just make a decision and just know in our minds that the Most High is greater than us. He's able to do what we're not able to do. And we have to just get to that place first and be in a cycle of that. Because again, when we think about the feast days and they're showing us the whole plan, the Feast of Unleavened Bread is that, in Passover Feast of Unleavened Bread, again, it's that initial transition part, but the law don't come until after. They ain't even know about the law yet. They don't know what the Most High likes and what he don't like. That didn't come yet. Right? And so when we think about it from a spiritual perspective, it's the same thing. When you choose Yeshua as your savior, as your redeemer, you don't know everything that is required of you at that time. All you know is that you are this terrible person that needs to be changed and transformed. That's all you know. And he's the one that's able to do it. That's all you know. Right? And so all you can do is just trust in that little part over there. And then the rest of that, the other parts, they come after. Yeah. Oh, hold on 1 second. Hold on. Okay, go ahead. She's right. Yeah, 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 absolutely. Yeah, yeah. hmm Pride is always going to be that thing that's going to stop you. And again, that's the part that you got to be able to get over to even get to that next part. As soon as we sit up here and try to figure out all of these things, like that person that you was talking to, they didn't get to the place of fearing the Most High yet. And until they get to that place, they gonna always be sitting up there asking those types of questions, right? Because the first thing you got to do is fear the Most High. That part is not there in that scenario, right? And so when it is there, that's not a question, right? When you got that fear of the Most High in you, you not thinking about do I gotta. So you saying I gotta bow down? Yeah, yeah, you gotta bow down. Yes. Matter of fact, show me where I'm supposed to be bowing at. Lead me to that spot where I'm supposed to be at, because I'm trying to do it on the quick fast. Right? When that fear is there. That's not even a question. Right? And so it's not hard for us to understand this idea that pride is this thing that's stopping us in every area. Right? It could be connected to anything. Like when we again, when we think about the commandments, and if we just think about Exodus chapter 20 and verse 2, I am Yahweh thy Elohim that brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Pride is going to be, pride going to have you asking questions like, well, prove it then. Yeah, show me like give me two precepts that cause me to believe that. Right? And so pride is the key component. But again, we what we have to be able to do is get to the place where we're able to identify the pride and then just make a decision to hand that pride over to the Most High. Again, we not even dealing with the idea of spiritually strengthening us to maintain that thing, because again, in the process of things, that part is second. The how, the why, all of those things is second. But first is just even making the decision and choice to be able to trust in the Most High in the first place. Lastly, lastly that I wanted to just talk about real quick is if you go back to Exodus 12. In verse 19, even that soul where it says 7 days y'all shall no leaven be found in your houses, and whosoever which that which is leavened, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. And so when we think about the fact that we have this 7-day period where we're supposed to be cutting out this leaven and maintaining the cutting off of the leaven for the 7-day period, and again thinking about the fact that we looking at this thing as in terms of removing the pride from our lives, right? The consequences of this thing is life or death, or at bare minimum it's about being in or out, right?
Black or white, whatever.
I don't know if there's a difference. To me, I think if you're in, if you're out, that is death, right? That's my thoughts on the matter. So I'm saying it's life or death. We could take it to the bare minimum and say it's about being in or out, but I'm saying that out is death, right? There's not a difference. There's no difference, right? And so when we think about this over here, right, this thing it's a major situation over here. This idea of getting the leaven out and not partaking of it, right? And so somebody might sit up here and say, well, somebody that you may talk to might sit up here and say, well, the law doesn't save you. Well, I agree. The law doesn't save you, comma, but is where we at. We're at the but part, right? Because if we look, let's pull up a couple scriptures over here. If we just talk about this right over here, just think about Exodus, this scenario, right? If these people didn't do what the Most High said do, they wasn't going to be able to partake of this thing that was going on outside of their own strength. Right? When we think about the Exodus, we think about the Passover, even just thinking about the Passover. All you had to do was sit up here and kill the lamb and put the blood on your doorpost, and then the Passover, the death angel was going to go past your house. Right? And so the thing that was going to your salvation, the salvation of your firstborn over there, caused for you to have to sit up here and make this initial act of obedience. It caused for you to be able to do this thing that the Most High said for you to do, which applied the salvation to your situation. And so again, even in that situation, again, the law comes after. They didn't even know what the law was. But there was a thing that they needed to do that if they didn't do it, he wasn't going to sit up there and say, well, Well, you didn't. You. I looked at your heart. You was a good. You was a good person. So I'm not gonna take your firstborn. No, there was things that needed to be done, and so likewise, when we think about now in Messiah, all we have to do is apply what Yeshua did for us to our situation. And that part is our salvation. That's our justification. That's our introduction into the family. But if we sit up here and if we sit up here and do that, and then once we say that we've done that, and then we go out here and do all types of gross iniquities, where does that land us? We end up in the same situation that we was in before that, or worse, if there is such a thing. And so when we sit up here and make these statements about things, talking about the law doesn't save you, well, let Messiah be your savior, and then go out here and become a whoremonger, and then see what happens. Right? So you're right. It don't save you, but it you walking in it is proof that it did happen. That's the thing right there. It's the proof that it did happen. You walking out the character of the Most High is the proof that he did save you. So I want to pull up this verse over here. Ephesians in chapter 2. Ephesians chapter 2 and 8. Because this is a verse over here. Oh, hold on. Let me put this over here real quick. Okay, here we go. What's that say right there? Ephesians 2 and
For
8.
by grace are ye saved through faith, and not of yourself. It is a gift of Yahweh.
Oh, my fault. Down to 10.
Not of works, lest any man should boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Mashiach Yeshua, Hamashiach Yeshua, unto good works, which Yahweh have before ordained that we should walk in them.
Okay, so this is one of those things over here that shows us that the law is not what saves you, but right? It says over here, grace is the thing that saved you through faith, not of yourselves, not of works, that any man should boast. It's not based on the things that you shaking the whole table. It's not based on the works or the things that you did. That's not the thing that got you in right relationship with the Most High. Your faith in his saving power got you in right relationship with the Most High. But verse 10 over here is the most powerfulest verse over there, right? For we are his workmanship, created in Messiah unto good works. So based on the thing that was already done, that was done by grace through faith, not of yourself, as a result of that, there's good works that come as a result of that, which Elohim have before ordained that we shall walk in them. What's the them that you're walking in? The them that you're walking in is the good works. So we talking about kind of a if then situation. We're talking about kind of a cart before the horse situation. So, but what we can't do is sit up here and act like the Most High is going to really allow for us to be going around here still wicked.
Because he said preordained, so beforehand, before you knew, ordained.
Yeah, exactly. It was always like this. He always had a way for us to be. But he had to first get us back in right relationship with him, and then now it calls for us to walk in a certain way. So again, in the context of unleavened bread, this choice, this choice that we make is a life and death choice that we're making. Right? It's a life or death decision that we make to do it. Right? And there's things that are involved that that granted, we probably didn't think about everything. But that don't make you not responsible for all of the things that that come with the package, right? That's what happened with Israel. They said whatever in ancient Israel, they said whatever you say, that's what we'll do. Meanwhile, he didn't even say nothing yet. He didn't even say all the stuff yet. But they said whatever it is that you gonna say, we'll do that. And then lastly, hold on, lastly, I want to just pull this up. Um just another verse over here. 1 Corinthians 6 at 9. 1 Corinthians 6 and verse 9. What's that say?
Know you not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of Yahweh? Be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves with mankind,
Oh, my fault. Just go ahead and read down to 11.
nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners shall inherit the kingdom of Yahweh. And such were some of you, but you are washed, but you are sanctified, but ye are justified in the name of Hamashiach Yeshua and by the Spirit of Elohim.
Okay, so when we think about this idea again of removing this pride from our situation, identifying it, and keeping it out, again, at this stage in the game, if we're looking at the big picture, at this big picture stage in the game, we just talk about identifying it and making the decision to keep it out and doing whatever it is that we're capable of doing to keep it out. And again, at the pre spirit level, you're magnifying the Most High, right? Because you don't understand the ruach and the empowerment that the Spirit gives you. You just know that the Most High is able to do it. So you made a decision based on His power and His capabilities and abilities to to help you. And then hold on, no, it's not. Uh, somebody's on phone. Okay, so again, we have to understand that this decision that we make uh, with removing the pride, removing the leaven, is something that is life or death. There's life or death consequences with this thing. So again, we look at this verse over here, right, with these things, the fornicators and the idolaters and the adulterers and the effeminate and the abusers of mankind, the thieves, all of these things over here. Again, we could attach pride to all of these things, but we at the same time we have to understand that these things can't get into the kingdom, right? There's things that the Most High is not going to allow into the situation. right? And and that's just the facts of the matter over here. But this last verse, verse 11, where it talks about the idea of being washed and sanctified and justified, right? All of these things, look, in Messiah is the thing that is the one that's doing all of these things, and the Ruach. So again, kind of just closing down over here, when we think about how this is represented with the Feast of Unleavened Bread and how it affects us in our spiritual situation, it's about making that decision and that choice to be maintained. Right? There's so many things out here in this world that we're able to actually sit up here and will ourselves to do, right? And just do it without any kind of spiritual connection whatsoever, right? And so, but when it comes to these things that are life or death situations, this thing that is just it just reaches this impossible status for some reason. I'm saying that pride is the thing that's getting it to that place of impossibility in our hearts. And so we have to make that conscious decision to know that the Most High is able to help us through, and just let it be right there, right? And just let it, and then that's it. The Most High is able to do it. I don't know how He's going to do it, but I know He's able to do it, and I'm going to trust in Him. And then again, when you take that initial step, it gets you over to the next part where He literally gives you the spiritual strength to move through in victory, in righteousness. But if you don't never take that initial step, then there's nothing that can happen for you, right? And so again, just in closing, just thinking about the Feast of Unleavened Bread, we have to get to the place where we're spiritualizing these feasts and understanding the spiritual significances of them, and trying to see how we can work these things out, or allow these things to be worked out in our hearts and in our minds, so that we can be the people that the Most High will have for us to be. Because again, it's a life or death situation, right? He said if you don't get that leaven out, you getting cast out, you cut off from Israel, right? And so we have to think about these things in a serious way from a spiritual perspective. Okay, you got anything to add to that, Elder? You want to? I don't know. Is Elder Chris still over there? Okay, might be indisposed. Okay, so that being said, for now we're gonna go ahead and shut this down. Y'all willing, we will have something for the last day of Unleavened Bread, and subsequently the I guess we got the Shabbat before that, and then Shabbat come first, and then we'll have the last day. After that, well, not right after, but.